My name's Sasha Pete, and I'm joined by a fantastic individual. This man played both in the UK and in our NSL and continues to be involved in football today. None other than the great Frank McGrellis. Welcome, Frank, to this conversation.
Sasha, your introduction, mate. Thank you very much.
No, pleasure,
I'm on a cloud already, mate.
Oh, pleasure. So tell us, Frank, how did you fall in love with our great game?
Yeah, as far as I can remember, Sasha, kicked a ball and probably encouraged with my father, who was a sort of semi-decent player. He didn't play professional, but he played at high, what we call junior level in the UK. And I think he encouraged me, and all my friends around the village in Scotland were crazy in love with the game. And the two teams in Scotland and Glasgow are Celtic and Rangers, and the majority of sort of Scottish fans support them two clubs. You've then got the Edinburgh connection with Hibs, Hearts, and the St Johnstones, Kilmarnocks, etc., etc. But they definitely play second fiddle to the big two. And I'm a Celtic supporter, and we were going through a sort of very successful time with a quality team when I was a kid. And obviously that culminated in winning the European Cup in 1967. So let me just say the external bodies were all coming internal, and football was the one and only.
So I think you were born, you said obviously grew up in Scotland. Is it in Falkirk you grew up?
Born in Falkirk, and Falkirk was the nearest team to us. Yeah. But I never really took to the Falkirk side. It was always the Glasgow side.
Yeah.
And just with the success that Celtic and Rangers were having during that period, it's rekindling itself now, and it's always sort of been there, up and downs, but it's rekindling itself now, especially with Ange going to Celtic.
Yeah.
But the enthusiasm around the game at that time and obviously now, it's just always been there, mate. The passion.
Just let me work this out. You would have roughly been about 10 or so in your just pre-teen, and so fond memories of winning the European Cup. Do you remember that time there where Celtic won the European Cup?
Absolutely, yeah. 8 years of age, and so we're out on the street, and it was like we couldn't believe it. Everybody went out after the game. There was no pre-match. There was no celebration footage. It was basically the game ended and we were out on the street. And of course, everybody just to the football pitch, the local football pitch. And it was just like, we can't believe this. We can't believe this. What does this mean? Well, here we are 50 plus years on, and we know what it means. It's just legendary.
Yeah. Did you play for a school side? So how was the introduction sort of from informal playing in the park to more formalised football?
Yeah, I was fortunate in that there was a few options. There was school options and there was club options, and I was fortunate. Like, I went to school with. We had to travel 5 miles by bus every morning, and then the same on the way back. And some of the Kilsyth was the name of the town that I went to school at, and there was some of the guys, the older guys might remember a name by Hugh McCann. He was from Kilsyth, and he was at the same school as me. So he played for a club, funnily enough, closer to Falkirk, called Grangemouth International. And prior to Grangemouth International and me joining them at 12, it was just ad hoc. It was just play anywhere. It was on the local pitch with the local guys. It was, hey, we're having a game, scratch match, and I would pull on a strip and away we'd go. But it was always the passion around football. And I always seemed to be about 2 or 3 years younger than the rest of the guys. So, and I was even playing in goal at that stage just to get a game. It was crazy. So formal football really started when I went to secondary school, and also at 12 went to Grangemouth International. That's what they called themselves. And that was through Hugh McCann plus a couple other guys. And they more or less dragged me as the younger bloke along to Grangemouth International. And that lasted until I left school. And the beauty about that was I was 2 years younger than everybody else, so I wasn't getting a lot of game time. But we had two very prominent coaches, and some of the Scottish guys might know them. There was a lad called Davy Catnack who played for Celtic. He was our coach. And we also had a gentleman by the name of Alex Smith, who was the coach at a club called Stennismuir at the time, and went on to coach Aberdeen, St Mirren to Scottish Cup success, and also was part of the Scotland national squad. So it was quite interesting to have two people who, one played with Celtic, one went on to have a great coaching career. But they were just normal guys to us, you know. It was just like Davy and Alex, just like as the adults around the group. So let's just say, from a club point of view, we had quality. Somebody's just giving me a call here, mate. So we had quality guidance, let's say, quality coaching, and that was 2 nights a week, and then a match on the weekend. So from the point of view of the introduction, I had a good introduction, a quality introduction with good discipline, good professionalism, good sessions that obviously has stuck by me until even now. I sort of go back to some of them sessions and put them on. Yeah.
And so you're the smaller kid, sort of playing with the bigger lads.
Always, yeah.
So
yeah.
that helped you develop and probably pushed you a lot.
Well, did it, or did it hold me back? Because I didn't get a lot of game time at the time. But yeah, my loyalty to the club and my loyalty to the people at the club, I just stuck with it, mate, and just played when I could. What sort of progressed that is when we got to 16, we then started a younger team. Grangemouth International started a younger team. So I ended up being one of the main players in the younger team. So, and I had a season of that. And that's when the scouts started sort of knocking on the door. The older team, a couple of years prior to the new team starting, the new age group starting, there was 2 of our boys in the Grangemouth International team were selected to play for the Scotland under-15s against England. One of them played and one of them was on the bench. And one of the guys there, actually, some of the older guys might recognise for Sunshine George Cross days, was a lad called Derek Barnes. So he was in the under-15 Scotland squad, and he played at our club, Grangemouth International. So we had a bit of a profile, and what encouraged that profile encouraged scouts to come along from the local teams, the Falkirks, the Stennismuirs, the East Fifes, but it also brought along the scouts from England.
Yeah,
and that got me an introduction into my first time on a flight was flying to Arsenal as a 14-year-old for trial.
Wow.
And there's a name that was also on our team, the name Archie Fraser might ring a bell.
Yeah.
Archie run the A-League for a while. And yeah, Archie and I don't know if it was his first flight, but it was definitely my first flight. We flew to London for a week's trial at Arsenal. So I got the opportunity at Arsenal, Bristol City, Coventry City. So we got the opportunity to go for weekends and also for school holidays. And because our 2 teams, we were getting regular invites. We went to Burnley for a weekend and played scratch matches against Burnley. We went to Arsenal by bus, played scratch matches against Arsenal. And it was a good environment to be in because the scouts were having a look at the younger lads in our team. And that's what gave me the opportunity. I had the opportunity fortunately with about 7 or 8 different clubs, but I chose to go to Coventry against my family wishes of Celtic, but I chose to go to Coventry. Or
was there options was Celtic knocking at all?
Yeah, well, Celtic was. I mentioned the 2 players that played for the Scotland under 15s. It was Eddie Catinack and Derek Barnes, and these guys were 2 and 3 years older than me, and in my opinion, they were absolute guns. They signed for Celtic, and unfortunately, they call it an S form, a schoolboy form.
Yeah.
So they signed with Celtic on a schoolboy form, went up to training on Tuesdays. When they left school, they joined, but they ended up being released. And this was two players that I thought, 2 years, 3 years younger, I thought, if they can't carry on and play with Celtic, what chances of little Frank from the little village got? Yeah. And that was the thought process. So it was as a young immature, it was get out of the village, get down to the big league. That we always looked over the border to the Premier League, which it was then the old First Division. And we always looked at the Man Uniteds, Liverpools, Arsenals, Tottenhams, the successful teams. And that encouraged me to get out the village, go and do total focus, 100% football. And that's why I went to Coventry City, signed up as an apprentice at Coventry City.
So how long was that apprenticeship?
2 years.
Yep.
2 years, so 70, 40, 76. And then I signed professional. So in all, I was there for 4.5 years at Coventry City.
Good experience, being a young lad as an apprentice at Coventry. Do you look back on it with fond memories?
Absolutely, Sasha. The thing looking back on it is I was probably a little bit overawed with the whole situation of First Division, playing against some of the international players at the time against them, and also a lot of international players at Coventry. And it was just, I was living the dream, really, as a sort of 16-year-old. And it was just total football. And it was like, I look at it now, and I look at the young kids at Bentley Greens and other clubs, and they're just so happy to be involved in football. And then you get the other kids who have got the ambition and aggression and the foresight to say, I want to make something out of this, And I was probably a little bit laid back, and even now I'm pretty laid back, but I'm probably a little bit laid back as I wasn't that hungry, aggressive professional. Yeah. But I was just so glad to be involved in the situation in the top league in England.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because you'd see, over the years, you'd see loads of players coming through that, trying to break into the first time, but you almost need to snatch it with your own hands. No one's going to, people give you the opportunity to play, but you've got to take the opportunity to make it yours. And a lot of it's in between your own head about you deserving the right to be there and then executing on that right to stay there.
Yeah. And I look at it, and I look at some of the other young lads that were there at the time, and I was there for my talent. I wasn't there for my total ambition and my total foresight to be a full-time player and go on to international level. And it was just I'm along for the journey. I'm along for the ride. And I look back at that and think, man, what an opportunity. It could have been so different. Yeah.
So this is so now sort of, let's fast forward a bit looking back. I mean, so talent will get you to the level that you are. So water always finds its level. But would you say that talent can only take you so far? It's the hard work, determination, professionalism, doing extras. So it's mentality that makes you a footballer. Talent will get you to a level, but it's mentality that takes it at next level.
And you're using the word mentality. I mean, we're now talking 45 years plus ago. The game has moved on to such a level that we're actually identifying talent at 6 years of age in Europe and bringing them into academies. I mean, I never lived that 6 years of age through to the apprentice at 16, but I definitely had a good grounding with the club that I was at to move in to that level. And looking at the word you're using, mentality, was, I remember floating around the training ground at Brighton, which is Coventry's training ground, and just thinking, like, this is great. Like, I just want to be here. And the other boys were like, I want to go home. I was billeted next to the Coventry City ground, and the other guys are like Birmingham off home, Northampton off home. Well, we didn't go home on the weekends because it was a 6-hour train ride. So I was like, oh, I just want to be around the training ground. And then obviously on match day, home match day, I just want to be around, again, Highfield Road Stadium. So, and I look back on that, and it's not a regret in the sense that, what could have been, but more so it was definitely enjoyed a lot. I enjoyed that period of my life, and it was great grounding for football. What we learned was great.
Talk to me about some of the characters at Coventry. Who did you mix with the dressing room?
Yeah, well, the manager was Gordon Milne, who was involved in the 1966 World Cup squad.
Yeah.
He wasn't one of the 11, but he was involved in the squad. He was an ex-Liverpool player. The internationals at the time were Scottish internationals were Jim Brogan, who came down from Celtic, and that was a buzz because Celtic was my team and I'd supported this guy on the sidelines, and he came and joined at the same time I did, funnily enough. Tommy Hutchison, who was a Scottish international and went on to play Man City. People will remember for the Tottenham Man City FA Cup final. The Irish lads, Jimmy Holmes, the Welsh lads, Les Cartwright. So there was the Welsh captain, Terry Orath, came from Leeds at that time, a very successful Leeds team. Terry Orath came to Coventry. Jimmy Blythe was a Scottish international goalkeeper. So we had sprinklings around the club that were obviously talented players of the time. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So this is sort of mid 70s, late 70s. So have we moved to 2 substitutions or just still one on the team sheet? One.
Yeah,
see, this is what people don't realize. You look at an A-League list and there's almost as many people on the bench as there are on the park, at least in the warm-up. What do they go out with 22 and you made an A-League squad? So when you if you get on the bench, that's how hard it is just to make the side, and you really got to cement it. Now, talking about your time as let's say a young teen, by the time you become professional there. So what were you 17, 18? Is that the time where
16, 17, and then sign professional or move on?
Yeah.
So it was ruthless. We had 16 apprentices, so they would have 8 at I was born in 58, so they would have 8 when I arrived. They would have 8 at 57 and 8 at 58, like around that,
and then they swap out number. The 8 each year.
Then the older, the 57s, they would spend my first year. At the end of my first year, the 57s, they signed maybe 2 professional, the other 6 moved on. And then we became, we became the older apprentices, and then at the same time, 2 from my level and 6 moved on. So it was ruthless, mate. When just stepping back a little bit, they were telling us the numbers. So when I used to go to Coventry in the holidays, they would look at 1,000 players over a year and sign 8.
Yeah,
and sign 8. So. So 1,000 scouts would bring in 1,000 and recommend 1,000, and they would sign 8 for the apprenticeship for the year, plus minus. So that then I was billeted for sort of the 2 years apprenticeship, and I then moved, signed professional, and then we have to move at the hostel, and the hostel was right next to Coventry City's ground, so we overlooked the away end. So, which, was another story in itself. So we were hanging out the window as the Arsenal supporters were here to watch the Arsenal game, Liverpool, Newcastle. They were the loudest. So the hostel was in the middle of the city, and then right in the training ground was a sort of 20-minute minibus ride. So that was us Monday to Friday in the minibus at about 9:30, 10 o'clock. Up at the Wrighton training ground, getting ready for the seniors coming in.
And so when you're playing an apprentice, is that enough to live off, or is just to get by?
Money wise?
Yeah.
Oh, we only had, the accommodation was paid for. Everyone was paid for, apart from The year that I joined, they doubled the salary from £8 to £16, and we were like, Yahoo, £16 for doing what we love.
Yeah.
So the sort of going rate at the time, you could survive. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And talk to me about, like, say, the internationals that are in the squad.
Yeah.
What would you say was the difference of you as a 18-year-old, 17, 18-year-old to them? So we talk about 10% difference, 20, like how much more do you need to excel to displace one of them?
Let's just say, how can I put it? But we're so naive. We're so naive as the 16, 17-year-old. And you're looking at another name, English international, Larry Lloyd, who went on. We signed for a record fee, £240,000 from Liverpool, and he played for Coventry. And unfortunately, Larry had a clash of personalities, and he ended up, Brian Clough re-signed him again. And again, he went on and played for England again. So that's the standard. But looking at maybe me to a Larry Lloyd, total experience, total arrogance, total sort of confidence, just a confident individual. And that's what all the senior players were like, really. And then you've got the 16, 17-year-olds, and it's just about pace, enthusiasm, and let me get a kick of the ball. And like a rabbit, sort of a chicken with its head cut off, just going, hey, Frank, do this. Hey, Frank, do that. And that was the learning process of, okay, I've just got to listen to these guys and say, and sort of work around what they're trying to tell me to do, in the positions that I was playing. So, but great learning experience playing with these guys. We played scratch matches against them, and another international, Jim Holton, for Manchester United, and he came to Coventry later in his career, and we played a scratch match, and I was playing against Jim, and the ball, a goal kick out, and I'm playing in midfield for the scratch team against the first team, and the ball's between the defenders and the midfield of the opposition. So I'm in the midfield, and I backed off to come and head the goal kick, which was coming high. And Jim's coming from defence to attack the ball and head it back the other way. So, of course, it wasn't a good outcome. So I've come back and flicked the ball on, and Jim's came forward and caught me in the back of the head and knocked me into Timbuktu, mate. So that gave me a week off with concussion. So, and talking to Jim afterwards, who's unfortunately passed away now, but talking to Jim afterwards, he said, Frank, I thought I'd killed you. He said, he said, I thought I'd killed you. I was just so glad when you woke up, mate. So playing against these physical, like men of strong bodies, etc., a big Adonises, and here we are, like 16, 17, like a stick, and having a go against these guys.
But I always see, you look now at, let's say, senior football at any level. So I'm talking about run from state 5 all the way up to A-League. There's not enough of that old school first 11 and second 11 football where the younger boys actually get to say, okay, I'm not that far off your ability. I mean, I remember going back years ago, we would run that, at least every 2 weeks of a Thursday night, there'd be a first 11 against the second 11, right? Yeah. We're now so focused on the football problem and this week and how we're going to get up against the opposition and centralize instead of that, those old scratch matches that seem to sort of edged away from the game. Did you find a real advantage being able to show yourself in that, being in a scratch match against the first 11?
Oh, absolutely. Look, it was because of the amount of players. It was just great to get that experience. And what you're touching on there is like me doing a passing drill, bam, 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 against, and I'm talking now, let's do the passing drill, and go. And some of the kids have been doing passing drills now for 3, 4, and 5 years. And it's like, not this again. And it's hard as a coach to stir them up to the point where you're saying, you know, you're doing this for a reason. You're doing this for a reason. Oh, not this passing drill again. I'd just gone back. That experience gone in with them and took a tip from an international on how to progress your game. Another tip from another international, another quality player, playing at the highest level in England, and boom. So the tips and the advice, and you're just like a sponge grasping it all. So now, and what you're saying is, we're sort of in a squad, and it's like you're doing the 14s, I'm overseeing 14, 15, 16, 18, and it's like, stay with your squad, do your passing drill, do your game, do your training game, and then we're out of here, you know. Whereas I know it was another level, but only our under 21s get the opportunity most of the time to get involved with the senior team in a scratch match, because it's like 18 senior players. Can we have 6 from the 21s just to make it up? And if we need some subs, we've got rotation, you know. Whereas we had, there's people all over the world are making their debut at 16 years of age, you know. Whereas now, are we looking at our 16-year-olds to get involved in a senior environment? So, and that's even within a club like Bentley Greens. I mean, we were fortunate the last 3 years with a 17-year-old, 2000, and I know the COVID disrupted the season, but 17-year-old, 17-year-old, and then this year a 16-year-old has been involved either training with the first team and playing with the 21. So, which has been good, but it's a minority, isn't it? It's one-off. Yeah, it's a one-off. Whereas I remember the old Sunshine Georges when you had a John Markowski, you had a Paul Trimboli, you had a Kevin Muscat, you have the Foster boys, and here we go on, you know, and that was just one club. Yeah. And when I went to Juventus, it was Paul Della Rocca, it was Fausto Diamicis, you know, it was like whoosh, fast forward. Yeah, fast forward.
So yeah, it's almost like, and we're talking about, you know, we need to rethink development, but the fact is, it's only the small percentage that are going to make it. But we need the framework in order to pick the small percentage to make it. So we've almost, will we come for, you know, we, I mean, we both coach. I mean, you to a great experience, but you know, does any training drill replicate the game? And if it doesn't, is it useful? Right? Because at the end of the day, what we're playing is the game.
Yeah. So here's a point, Sasha. Just my upbringing. I lived between 2 houses. There was just enough space for drive one car in against the wall at the side of my house, and then drive the other car in at the side of the neighbour's house. So I had 2 walls, double story, and I lived football and then 2 walls, bang, 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 bang. We then had, as you drive in the 2 cars, we then had 2 garages, wooden garages. So I had wall, double story, garage, and I would just constantly be doing my own exercises there. So the reason I'm saying this is we've got kids coming into the game at 14 years of age, 15 years of age, and we have to teach them the basics of the game. The control, the pass, the chip, the dribble. We have to teach them that they've got their own natural ability, but they're well behind. Starting at 14, you're up against it. I just talked earlier about the kids starting at 6 and 7 years of age now in Europe. Well, I started 5, 6 years of age in my own little circuit. And by the time I got to sort of 14, 15, that talent was there, that ability and that skill was there. By the time I got to Coventry, they didn't teach me how to control. They didn't teach me how to pass. They didn't teach me how to chip, because at 15 years of age, I had all of that ability. That's the reason I got there in the first place. So I had my upbringing had given me the heading ability, the control, the movement, the touch, the passing. So I was fairly well done the track of the ability-wise when I was 16 and went to Coventry City. Now we've got kids starting the game at 14 and expecting to move on to Real Madrid.
Yeah. So there's a partial disillusion. But in one aspect, I remember as a 14-year-old, and like I said, I've been coaching the sort of that 14 to 18 age bracket. At 14, I couldn't do a double around the world. I wouldn't even think about doing it,
well,
right? So and half of my side can do that. We didn't do it, but
yeah.
Then we're telling them where to stand and where to make runs. So that's what we've lost. We've lost that innate ability to know
the basic talent.
Yeah,
the basic talent. So now we've got YouTube. Now we've got internet. Now we've got so the kids can tune into anything that they want to tune into, and I call it the fluff of the game. So I go into a group, 14-year-olds. I coach at school as well. So I'll come in and I say, oh, come on in. Get in before we start training. I say, before we start training, show us what you can do with the ball. Oh, what do you mean? Well, I'm sure you've got a trick or two, haven't you? And then around the world, and then they're doing their flickovers and they're doing this and they're doing that. So we go around 14 to 16 kids. Yeah. And it's around the world and it's the fluff, as I call it. And I go, oh, that's great, lads, great, good work. I said, tell me, out of them 14 or 16, how many can you do in a game? And they just look at each other and they can't do it in a game. You know, so it's all about, we love Neymar and what Neymar does. We love the super talented internationals. I'm not sure if you caught up with Richarlison, moved to Tottenham and juggled the ball 2 weeks ago, and the British media are crucifying him because he's showboating, you know. And in a certain sense, it's right. So there's a time for the showboating, but there's a time for the basic skill. And 99 times out of 100, mate, the basic skill is going to get you through to another level, not what you can do. I used to juggle the ball, and of course, and many a time I balance the ball in my head, and they call, "Oh, look at the seal." And many a time, oh, you should be in a circus, mate. You know. But I could do the showboating in the car park, and we did it on the pitch, in the car park, out in the street. I could do the showboating with the flicks and at the time, but I also could deliver when it came to matches, and that's what got me there. That's what got me there.
Yeah. So often maybe and the one thing maybe that we've lost is I hold the belief that players make it because of X factor. It's something special of that player, but yet we maybe in the last decade and a half, what we've done is conditioned players to play as a unit. And what we've forgotten is we need to provide a framework so people show their X factor within that framework, right? So, so it's a little bit robotic at the moment. You see a Bentley Greens play in green top, George Cross play in a red and white top, and like they could swap tops, and
the teams are all, and this is obviously 10 years ago. We got the Dutch influence, but as I was saying there with the tricks and the showboating, why are we not encouraging the younger kids to go at people, to take people on? It's an art of the game, the dribbling and the beating an opponent. It's the art of the game that we all love. Look at him go past people. Messi, look at him go past people, And I look back at it and I think individually, the kids in the park going down the street or whatever, individually they'll do their bits and pieces. But when they come to the club, they're actually being coached as a team. So you've got your coach, yourself as a 14s, and we've got our coaches, and they're coaching the units. They're coaching the strikers, they're coaching the midfield, they're coaching defensively, they're coaching the shape, they're coaching defensive shape, they're coaching attacking shape, how we have to support the ball. And then also, all right, we've lost the ball now defensively, we've got to get back behind the ball and we've got to get our shape, pattern of play. So we're focusing. So individually, you more or less have to go to an academy to learn the individual skills, control, inside the foot, outside of the foot, drag backs, chip the ball in, hit the crossbar. So you're more or less looking, when you come into a club, and I'm sure you're similar, right, I've got to manage 14 to 18 kids here. What am I going to do? So it's maybe 4 stations and a passing drill, 6 station passing drill, or is it right? We're right into crossing and getting people in the box and where you should be. So you're managing 14 to 18 kids. You're not looking after little Johnny and saying, nah, mate, can you cushion the ball and then take it with your other foot and get away from the opponent? You know, so the individual skills we seem to be losing a little bit, whereas the pattern of play and the shape of a team and the different units in the team is where the majority of coaching is within the clubs. Yeah, that's how I see it. That's how I see
absolutely. I agree 100%. The one thing that we've lost, if you look, you know, I'm a generation younger than you, but we still had disorganized play. I'd finish school and we get to, you know, the bins out and they'd be the goals, or we'd mark out the chalk on the wall and they would be the goals or whatever. Yeah. We didn't have professional cones, but we would play. We'd mark up, you know, 2v2, 3v2, 4v3, and you play numbers. Now it's all organized play. So the dad needs the dad's got the kid in the club format and he's ferrying, and like I do, I've got, you know, individual sessions with 2 other professionals, right? To get that creative individual flair that doesn't happen, because in school, so I say to my kid, don't you play football at school? It's like, no.
Some of them don't. Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
Because when we play, there's like 60 of us playing.
Yeah.
You can't play 60 players on a 30 by 30 grid.
That's it.
And nobody passes the ball, right? So that's the problem. So we've got a problem because right now, so if it was Saturday morning at 9 o'clock and you go to a park, there'd be nobody playing there.
Yeah.
No kids of age, you know, whether it's cricket, soccer, football, AFL, rugby, it doesn't happen. It happens in these academies that organize. So that's the one shift that we need to understand.
Just a point on that is we used to have our scratch matches after school, especially in the summer when it was light until 10 o'clock at night. But our Sunday, it was mass on a Sunday and it was 1 o'clock on a Sunday at the local school ground, and everybody used to come in. And it was like 15 aside, depending on the numbers, who was available on the day. It would go from 8 aside, 10 aside, and it was just total football, you know. So there's the point. Like, as a younger kid, the older guys who were experienced in the game, I could do triple somersaults before these Russians came to the Olympics, because I'd be running with the ball. The older experienced defender would slow down and time it, that as I got to the ball, he would take me in the ball and I would be like doing triple somersaults, mate. That's like, as a 13, 14-year-old and experienced adults are taking you out. That was, when I think about it, it was cruel. Yeah.
Let's wind back. You're at Coventry City and you loaned out. So how did that work? So how did you eventually get the news that you're going to be moved on?
Yeah, I got an opportunity with Huddersfield, and that came about, I think it was 1978, probably around about 70, 78, possibly. Anyway, the what we used to do was youth team. We used to play with the youth team, national youth team, and the youth league. We used to play against West Brom. We used to play against Derby, Forest, and all these clubs around, Notts County, etc. So we'd play the youth league. So we had a proper match in the youth league. And then the Central League was the reserve league at the time. And we used to play our home games on a Tuesday night. So if Coventry City were playing Liverpool at Coventry was the home side, we'd get in the bus and travel to Liverpool, and we'd be playing at Liverpool. And that was, at the time, Everton, Liverpool, Leeds, in the Central League, Villa. There was the Boltons. So they had the whole... So we would do the opposite. but we as in the club, Coventry used to play some Tuesday night matches. So, and that was a buzz, playing under floodlights in the reserves on a Tuesday night. And one of these games was Huddersfield, and Tuesday night, and I ended up scoring 4 goals in the night, and that then prompted Huddersfield to say, is it an option to take him on loan? And it was a surprise to me. I just come in Huddersfield and I thought, why not? You know, I was like the talent at the club was competing against the Mike Fergusons, Ian Wallace, £1 million player, Alan Green, Donald Murphy, and then at the latter stages, in Gary Thompson, Mark Haitley. So I was one of about seven strikers looking to get a gig in the first team. And you're right in what you say about one sub, so there wasn't many opportunities. If I can just, I twice was the 13th man on the travels. So we went to Norwich. Interesting. My girlfriend was coming down from Scotland for the weekend. We've done this Friday morning session at the training ground, and after the session, it's like, you're travelling to Norwich tomorrow. You're 13th man. And I'm like, sorry, we travelled overnight. We stayed overnight. Friday, we travelled in the afternoon, and the game was on the Saturday. And I'm like, my girlfriend's coming from Scotland. She knows nobody but me. And I'm off. I'm not going to be there. So fortunately, I got a friend at the time and organised her. And he actually brought her to the game at Norwich. I sat in the stand. I didn't get the gig. We ended up beating Norwich 2-0. I think Ian Wallace was one of the scorers. And the other massive opportunity was Liverpool in the League Cup, a Tuesday night match at Anfield. And it's like touch on the shoulder. You're traveling with the team, and I'm like, far out. That was so I was 13th man that night. We drew 2-2 at Liverpool, and again Ian Wallace scored, I think. But there was an injury cloud over Jim Holton, who was a central defender, and we had injuries at the time. And Mike Ferguson, who was a striker, if Jim didn't come through and play, Mike was going to go back to centre half, which wasn't his position, from centre forward. And then our 12th man was going to go in and play, and I would have been on the bench. But once again, it didn't quite happen. But the upside of that is I got the bonus for travelling with the team at Norwich for a win, and I got the bonus for travelling to Anfield. So if you're in the squad, you get the bonus. And yeah, that was a healthy little kick into the bank balance. But the unfortunate thing is, if it had been like it is now, 4, 5, 8 subs, we would have got on the turf in front of the crowd. Yeah. So, and what you're saying with the Huddersfield connection, after I played them in a night match and obviously had a dream game, they said, come up to Huddersfield. And again, that was different. That was wild, mate. They were in the lower tiers then, and they were struggling at the time. And I think I'd only been there about 3 weeks. I actually made my league debut and my senior debut at Huddersfield. So the League Cup, we played Preston in the League Cup in an away match, and that was my senior debut. And it was a 2-legged League Cup, and Preston beat us. We had a good go against them, but they beat us. And then I made my, if you want to call it, league debut as well while I was at Huddersfield. Yeah. So, and Huddersfield were going through a bit of a rough patch at that time, and they replaced the manager, Johnson. They replaced him with a lad called Mick Buxton, and that changed. That the previous manager had seen us, wanted us, and then the new manager was building for the future. And he's like, Frank, if you're not going to be here for the future, I've got to look at our Huddersfield players and build more or less my own squad and run with it. So, but that was a great experience, playing senior football and getting a chance to play again in real games, if you want to call it that.
And then, so you end up, I think in '79, you end up making a a permanent transfer to Hereford United.
To Hereford United, yeah. Also, he was a year older than me, a lad called Val Thomas. And his younger brother Danny Thomas came to the club as well, and was he was going to be a future international, and unfortunately got a bad injury. That was Danny Thomas. But Val Thomas and myself were called into Highfield Road to chat to. There was a legend at Wolverhampton Wanderers called Mike Bailey, and there was a legend at Gould. He had about 12 clubs. Bobby Gould was a legend. The people will know him as a manager because he managed Wales, and he also managed Wimbledon to beat Liverpool in the cup final around about 88, was it? Liverpool lost 1-0 to Wimbledon, and Bobby Gould was the manager then. So Mike Bailey was the coach, and Bobby Gould was the player assistant coach, a couple of legends in the English game. And they interviewed us in the boardroom at Coventry. And we want to build our team around you, So myself and Val Thomas moved to Hereford in the 4th tier. So, and it was really just an opportunity to play senior football. Yeah. So that was, 1979, I moved to Hereford.
And you stayed there a few years, I think.
Yeah, 3.5 years at Hereford. And then I got the opportunity to go to South Africa, and that was really because of a family connection. But the 3.5 years at Hereford, you're getting into again a good squad of young players and also very experienced heads. And some of the older people will remember the name Alan Birchinall, who used to play with Chelsea and Leicester, and I think he's actually involved in Leicester now as a marketing person. Alan Birchinall, he was just one of the he was just story time, quality player on the pitch, advice to young kids. He was just bursting with information and was happy to share. And what a quality lad. And again, if you remember the pop group Shawadi Wadi, that was his era. He grew up with them boys in a pop group in the UK called Shawadi Wadi. So he knew them. He also knew.
He would have been popular.
He was just Jack the lad. I mean, he had been at Chelsea, Kensington, London. He was just Jack the lad. He was long blonde hair. He was. You just want to hug him every time you see him. He was a great guy. But Hereford, Mike Bailey, we joined in the March.
What tier is this in
4th tier?
Fourth tier.
So we joined in the March. That would have been March 79. We played about the last 8-10 games of the season. And I started off quite well. And unfortunately, it was only 8-10 games cut pre-season. And we came back full of enthusiasm second time around. Kicked off in August, September, and then in the October, Mike Bailey got the opportunity to go to his childhood club, which was Charlton, and Bobby Gould got the chance to go to Chelsea as assistant to Jeff Hurst. So at the same time, bang, off goes Mike to coach Charlton, who were in the 2nd tier, and off goes Bobby Gould to coach Chelsea with Jeff Hurst, as some of the older guys will remember Bobby Gould anyway. So managerless for about 6 weeks, and then the new manager came in, and he was a tough, aggressive, Frank Lord, his name was, tough, aggressive manager. It was about rah-rah, and me being more a skillful player than a rah-rah player. We clashed from early on. Because I was scoring goals and because I was part of the first team, he couldn't really sort of drop me. But slowly, it was coming to the end of the season, 1982, the middle of 1982, and our relationship was non-existent with the manager. And he had South African connections, and he asked me if I wanted to go to South Africa, and I went, "What? Why would I go to South Africa? And he's like, "No, I'm going to release you." So I thought, if he's going to release me at the end of the season, we've got about 2.5 months before the season starts again. So my mum's brother had been in South Africa from the early 60s. And on his trips back from South Africa when I was a kid, he always said, if you ever get the chance through football to come to South Africa, come and meet my family. So 2 and 2 came together. South Africa, you're going to be released. And I'm like, let me go there. If it doesn't work out, I can always come back. And even if I go back to Scotland. But I ended up at a club called Highlands Park in Johannesburg. And yeah, it was the best time of my single life, I guess, in Johannesburg. Football life. I had to work for the first time because I had always been full-time football, and I had to work for the first time. And yeah, joining in with family over there. Although I had a big family at home, but joining in with family and getting to know the family in South Africa, yeah, was a bonus. So yeah, I loved it over there.
And the standard of football in South Africa at the time, what tier are you playing there?
Similar standard to when I came to the NSL in 1987. I was top tier. It was top tier, and the game in South Africa was definitely more attended by the Africans. There was a joint league. It was, if you want to call it, here we have South Melbourne Greek Committee and recognised as a Greek club. Green Gully, Maltese, recognised as Maltese, when in actual fact the players are multiracial and the players all just come in and play, but they're recognised as teams. So over there, it was similar, that they had the different community backgrounds. And then there was I played for Highlands Park, which was recognised as a Jewish committee and a Jewish club. And that's where I started, Highlands Park, and ended up doing very well on the football park over at Johannesburg.
Awesome. Yeah. And so why the move to Australia? Because the move to Australia you end up staying. So
absolutely,
yeah. So,
look, at the time,
how did that come about?
At the time, I was flying on the pitch and going well on the pitch. I had moved from Highlands Park, who were sold to a legendary black player called Jomo Sono. He came back from New York Cosmos. He played with the Pellies and all the Beckenbauers and the big guys, etc. Made a lot of money over there and came back and bought his own club. He bought out Highlands Park and called it Jomo Cosmos. So I left Highlands Park, Jomo Cosmos, and went to a club called Wits University. And Wits University, I ended up spending the majority of my time in South Africa there and doing very well. So, sorry, you just asked me the question.
Yeah, the question was how did you make it to Australia?
To Australia. So at that time, and we're talking 85, 86. There was a lot of. It was the first time I had worked actually when I was over there full time. And there was a lot of union interaction coming in to the corporate companies over there. And my father, I got married when I was in South Africa, and my father-in-law at the time was a bit of a visionary. And he said, we got to get out. We got to get out of South Africa, because he had lived through the Rhodesia, Zimbabwe situation where there was a lot of bloodshed, unfortunately. And he said, we got to get out. We're not sure which direction this country's going to go in. With the it was still apartheid when I was there, and it was still the Dutch government. It was a Dutch Afrikaans government. So my father-in-law, Norman, who was a bit of a visionary, says, we got to get out. And is it Canada? Is it America? And we didn't know what to do. And at the time, I'd been home to Scotland from South Africa, Christmas time, and there's a guy I used to play with, Robbie Cullen, who was at Sunshine George's and ended up was at Juventus with. When I arrived in South Africa, Steve Smith was playing for Wits University. I knew Stevie Smith from South African times. Sean Lane came in to Coventry as a 16-year-old. Not Coventry, sorry, Hereford. Sean Lane came into Hereford. He was a local lad, and he came into Hereford when I was at Hereford. So I knew Sean, I knew Robbie Cullen, I knew Brian Brown. Sorry, I knew of Brian Brown. I hadn't met Brian, but I knew of Brian Brown, who came from Falkirk and came to Brunswick Juventus. So Charlie Egan, I knew Charlie through schoolboy times, and Charlie actually lived under my granny at Croy, a village at Croy in Scotland. So I was home in Scotland and said, look, is there any chance to get into Australia? Anyway, through Robbie Cullen, through Sean Lane, through Charlie Egan, I get a phone call from South Melbourne Hellas. And I said, I can't come now. No, we want you to come now. No, I can't come now because of my commitments in South Africa. But what we done, as I said, my father was a bit of a visionary. Sorry, my father-in-law was a bit of a visionary. And he said, hey, it's time we should be looking to move as families. So that's how we ended up. I got back to Charlie Egan, Robbie Cullen, and I ended up, after the contact from South Melbourne, the decision was, let's run down what we have to do and we'll move countries at the end of the next season. And that's what I've done. So I actually arrived in Australia off the plane without contacting anybody. And I went to South Melbourne. I came off the plane and we got some accommodation in Albert Road in East Melbourne. And I asked the proprietor, I said, is there any football on? He said, oh, tonight South Melbourne are playing Marconi. And was it the Beach Fashions, they used to call it? I think it was the Beach Fashions. So I ended up, the day after coming off the plane, I ended up at a match on a Wednesday night and met Charlie Egan and some of these lads, and ended up training with South Melbourne for a while when Brian Garvey was the coach. So that was 1987 when I came to the country. And that's how it came about. That's how quickly it came about. And that's how, yeah, the unfortunate thing is I loved Johannesburg, South Africa, and the lifestyle, but we ended up moving here.
Trouble there. You got it.
Moving here as a family. And the fortunate thing is Nelson Mandela came out and it was a smooth transition. So, but obviously by that time I was pretty well established in Melbourne.
But you didn't sign for South. So what happened there?
When I arrived, it was a mid-season break for the Socceroos were playing in a tournament in China or somewhere like that. So I trained for 2 weeks with South Melbourne, and all the time there was Robbie Cullen, Sean Lane, and Brian Brown are like, come to Juventus, we'll sign you. I said, no, I've got to see out this trial at South Melbourne. And Brian Garvey, I basically fronted him. I said, look, I've been here for 2 weeks. We're paying a fortune in East Melbourne for accommodation, and I didn't know if I was going to be staying in Melbourne with South Melbourne or even Juventus at the time. So I said, look, I'm going to go and talk to another club, which he wasn't happy about, which was fair enough. But Juventus basically said, no, we want to sign you. Okay. So that's how I ended up at Brunswick Juventus.
So did you have to put a session on? Did you put the boots on at all? It was just like, no, we know.
No, I put the boots on at South Melbourne, but it was like who's the trialist, you know? And I actually played in a youth team game against the VIS, and Kimon Taliadoris was playing, and I'm pretty sure Con Butsianis was playing in that youth match for South Melbourne Hellas against VIS. And that's when I fronted Brian and said, look, you got to make a decision here. And he said, oh, we're not sure. We have to see this. We have to see that. I went to Juventus and trained. We played a scratch match. And fortunately, I scored a hat-trick. And
yeah, there we go. That'll do it. Yeah, what do you want? Yeah.
Okay. So, of course, South Melbourne and Brian Garvey weren't happy about the way it transpired. But I basically had to look after, I was here married, and sort of I had to look after myself at that stage, yeah.
And so was it the one season at Juventus? How long did you play at Juventus?
Yeah, I ended up staying there 3.5 years.
3.5 years.
But I signed with Juventus that second half of the year. We actually did okay and set up for the following year, 88. And that's where we signed Gary McDowell, we signed Charlie Egan, and we thought, oh, we're on the move here. We're on the way.
Couple of Socceroos there, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, we went through the season, and it was just one of them seasons. If it wasn't injuries, it was hitting the crossbar instead of going in the net. It was the keeper making a blinding save instead of sort of letting it go through his legs. So unfortunately, I'd strained badly an Achilles tendon, and I didn't have a lot of action. Sort of in that 88 season, and unfortunately, we got relegated. Yeah. So
so I'm trying to think. So Andrew Zinni, Mehmet Durakovic, who are some of
the you go through it, mate.
Who are some of the characters in the dressing room?
Yeah, well, just Peter Lewis, Brian Brown, John Eisendorn, Fabian Cantalupo, Mickey Peterson was there, but that's when he went to Ajax and came back and stayed a short time and moved over to South Melbourne. John Dowie, Robbie Cullen, Andrew Zinni, Sean Lane, and Fausto Diamicis was coming through. And who have I forgot?
Mehmet Durakovic there?
Mehmet. So the young lads were Zinni, Palasides, Joe Palasides, and Mehmet Durakovic were the young lads, and Fausto Diamicis. And they, of course, Scott Patterson. Don't forget Scotty. So, yeah, there was a fair sprinkling of talent and well-known names around the soccer circles. But, unfortunately, the first game was in Adelaide. I made my debut in Adelaide. We lost 1-0. And then I came back. We played Heidelberg at Olympic Park, and we beat them 3-0, and I scored a hat-trick. So it was like, oh, we're off and running here. But, unfortunately, it didn't carry on like that because we'd seen out the season then, and the following season, it was just disruption and misfortune, and we ended up getting relegated. But that dressing room.
Then did you continue to play on in the state league with?
I moved to Morwell Falcons. Okay. 1 year at Morwell Falcons, and again. Sort of characters in the dressing room, the Billy Wrights, the Jeff Doyles, Jimmy Nelsons, Jim McBrides. Yeah, some real characters down that side as well. So we finished, I can't remember, we finished about third or fourth in the league. And then, family reasons, and I moved to Springvale City, which I was living in Patterson Lakes at the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, ended up family reasons, it was easier for access. So I ended up 5 years at Springvale City before, winding up the career. Yeah.
So, and then straight into coaching, or did you have a break in between?
Straight into coaching, Doncaster Rovers. And Doncaster Rovers, they were in the first division. And there was the old VPL and then the first division. And they were one of the competitive teams in the sort of first division. So first coaching job, and a couple of people I knew in the game, Bill Murray and Franz Wimper. So I got them on the coaching staff, and then some players involved: Dean Hennessy, Jim McBride, Neil Wallace, Andy Humble, Stevie Brimmer. So we had some good quality players at the team. And we had a great season. And ended up winning the league.
Yeah, I remember that because I was involved at Western Suburbs at the time. So
that was that when Ange was coach?
Yeah, so he was
player coach.
He was there, I think, for a season.
Yeah, that was that season.
Yeah,
I coached against them, pretty sure.
Yeah,
that season.
Yeah, he was there.
They beat us twice.
Yeah,
they were the only team to beat us twice.
Yeah,
they beat us at home and away. I'm pretty sure.
So interesting. So that's where he actually is his first coaching gig before he then went to be the assistant at South.
And these were very competitive at that time. Very competitive.
Yeah. So little humble club. That's my local. That's my local club.
Jimmy Condilis.
Yes, he's still there, still alive and kicking. And
You're kidding. He's still running the show, is he?
so he's not. Yeah. So he still comes and watches.
Mm.
Yes. So fantastic. So you would have seen, many kids come through the years. So what advice do you have to that? We're talking about that transition from, youth football to senior football, right?
Yeah.
So you're now speaking to that 15, 16, 17, 18, maybe even 19-year-old boy or girl.
Yeah.
They're trying to break into a first team. What advice do you have for them?
Look, coaching is all about your results. Yeah. And that result dictates where your coaching career goes. So if you win 5 in a row, you might end up at South Melbourne as the coach, or Celtic as the coach, as Ange has moved on, which is brilliant for Ange and for the Australian game. So coaches will look at tried, tested and experienced players to see them through, especially in a bad time. So to introduce youngsters when they're not going well, it's a hard gig. So these youngsters they've just got to do their hard yards prior. When they get the opportunity to come in and either train with the first team or play in the second team, stand out. They've got to stand out first and foremost, and then catch the coach's eye, and then let the coach get them involved. And again, we touched on me previously. I was just happy to be in it and happy to be in that environment and love being part of it. But I didn't have that to say, hey, I want to be in that first 11 at a young age. And then I got the opportunity later. But for the youngsters that's coming through now, they've just got to value the experienced people who's going to give them advice along the way. They've got to work their socks off. I put it down to people will come to me pre-season and say, oh, I'm going to lose a couple of pounds and I'll be all right by the start of the season. I'm like, hang on a minute. What about prior? Are you ready to go now? So when we do the pre-season, you kick on again for another 15, 20%, and then you're ready to set your standards when we kick off the season. So 17-year-old, you've got to have the background done already. You can't come in as a 17-year-old and say, oh, well, I've got 6 months to get it right if they want to make the first team. They've got to be ready to go. So they've got to work their socks off before. They've got to work their socks off when they're part of it. And they've got to stand out and catch the coach's eye. And that can all be about timing, Sasha. Just the timing. Have the first team got a lot of injuries? So just whatever the timing is. And whether it's boys or girls, just get in there and make a statement.
I was speaking to a 21s coach who I'm doing my B license with, and he's coaching one of the 21s of the NPL, and he's in the final this week. And I said, oh, look, I like a couple of your boys, of your 21s, NPL one side. I said, I think that a couple of them might be able to play state two at suburbs.
Yeah.
So the question there is, do you think there's a delusion? And so there was a whole side conversation there. Do you think there's a delusion with players sub 21, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds? I mean, so, you were 17 playing first team football at your level, whatever level that is.
Yeah.
But now we're keeping these 18, 19, 20-year-olds and they're playing youth football against other youth bodies.
Yeah.
Do you recommend them getting some senior football in state 1, state 2, state 3 for a season, get that maturity and minutes in their legs to then have another go at, let's say, at an NPL level, let's say a Bentley Greens. So what do you recommend? Because you see it, you're the TD at Bentley and you've had 9 years there, right? Yeah. And, every year, you might have 6 or 8 players that stop playing football.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are you saying to them? So
realistically, it's hard to, I can generalize, but really it's a case for case. Yeah, I look at the individuals that we have we're now probably similar to your own club. We're now looking at 16-year-olds, 18-year-old, under 16, under 18, and under 21s. We'll possibly have some 21s moving on to find senior football. We'll possibly have 3 or 4 of these boys maybe moving up to the first team squad.
Yeah.
We've then got the 18s.
So that's good for you. So the 3 or 4, that's good. They've got a pathway, right?
Yeah.
So now the other 3 or 4, 6 that you're going to release, or you don't have a spot for because they're already too old, right? Yeah. What do you say to that group? Where do they go?
Well, I was in a similar position when I stepped down from Coventry to go back to Hereford. The idea was go back to Hereford, play, establish myself, make a name for myself, and then hopefully get a move away. And there was a couple of suggestions of that, but that never materialised. But now it's a case by case. So some of the kids might be late developers. So if they move from a Bentley to a Box Hill, it might be a case of they have a real good run at Box Hill, and then they move up to South Melbourne, or they move up to a Heidelberg. So I'd say a case by case, but in general, go and get some first team football. If you're not in the plans of the senior team, go and get some first team football. Don't be totally disillusioned about it, because this is the game you're in. The reality of football is some go on a straight line and some go on a diagonal to come back to that point. So I'd be saying, again, I'm saying case by case, but in general, I'd be saying go and get some senior football. The boys that's not in the first team squad, invited back, and don't be disillusioned about it. Work hard, do your best, and can you stand out at that level to get the opportunity to come back to a higher level? So, and I look at my club, Bentley Greens. We unfortunately for our youth, we don't have a lot because of the ambition of the club, how aggressive they have been in the transfer market and recruitment, and the success they've had. So it's been very difficult at a Bentley Greens level for our juniors to come and break into the first team squad. But is that any different to Man United? Is that any different to Man City?
No
is that any different to Liverpool?
Yeah.
You know, so there's some unbelievable talent at these clubs, but because of their ambition, because of the aggressive recruitment program, they're looking at the world's best players. So they might have Rashford's broke through, Greenwood's broke through, Elanga's coming through now. So, and there's a couple of others, McTominay. There's a couple of others have sort of made the jump. But when you look at, I mean, they're paying 60, 70, 80 million pounds for players.
Yeah.
And then, so is Bentley Greens at our level any different, you know, because they've been aggressive. South Melbourne, the same, aggressive. They need success. You know, Heidelberg, we need success. So,
yeah, fantastic words of wisdom there, Frank McGrellis, especially for the kids wanting to come through. Thank you for your continued contribution to Australian football. You've been a great servant of the game, both as a player and then as a coach, and you continue to inspire other coaches and players to continue on in your own little club. So well done and congratulations.
Yeah, Sasha, thanks for the opportunity. Obviously, we're snowed under by another sport in our town, Melbourne, with the footy, and we don't get much opportunity to get our message across, definitely in the mainstream media. So carry on what you're doing, mate. You're doing a great job for football. Carry on. Appreciate the opportunity.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Cheers.
Hey, guys. We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to our wonderful guest. If you like this type of content and would like to see more, how about you hit the like and subscribe button? And have a fantastic day.